When FYLPRO was first founded 12 years ago now, by then Ambassador Sequisha, FYLPRO came about kind of as a brainchild of his wife, actually, initially. And they brought together the Department of Foreign Affairs and our other partner, Ayala Foundation, Incorporated. And here to show a little bit more about this partner of ours from AFI. This is actually a project that they have right now. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Paulo.
Presentation is brought to you by Ayala Foundation in partnership with the National Historical Commission of the Philippines, Mitsubishi Corporation, Chicks to Go, and the Filipino Young Leaders Program. To welcome all of us to today's gathering, let us hear a few words from Mr. Tony Lambino, President of Ayala Foundation.
Greetings from the Philippines. Maraming salamat po sa inyong pagdalo. Together with the Ayala Group of Companies, Ayala Foundation stands in solidarity with the Filipino-American community as you continue to show what great things Filipino-Americans contribute to the world. Ayala Foundation is committed to building and nurturing communities where people are productive, creative, self-reliant, and proud to be Filipino. In the Philippines, we help improve lives through programs in education, sustainable livelihood, and love of country. One of our initiatives is the Maging Magiting advocacy. Maging Magiting is Filipino for be courageous or be heroic. This program recognizes the capacity of every Filipino to be a hero in both ordinary and extraordinary situations. Maging Magiting also promotes awareness of Philippine history and culture in all their richness and diversity. Filipino Americans are our allies in advocating causes that promote the interests of Filipinos in the Philippines and the global diaspora. This is why we are honored to partner with the Filipino Young Leaders Program, or FYLPRO, a network of dynamic next-generation Phil-Am leaders who are making a difference in their respective communities. It also brings us great joy to partner with FYLPRO on this Maging Magiting video production. In the next 30 minutes, you will be given a glimpse of pre-colonial Filipino life. The respected historian Ambeth Ocampo will paint a vivid picture of life before the 15th century. Then Marinela Mina, one of our curators at the Ayala Museum in Manila, will talk about pre-colonial material culture as evidence of social trade networks. Through their presentations, we hope that you will gain fresh insight into what it means to be Filipino and find a renewed sense of pride in our shared history and heritage. We are also happy to point out that the presentations are inspired by the collections of the Ayala Museum. For those who haven't had the chance, please come visit us at the museum when you are next in the Philippines, and we will show you the joy and wonder of Filipino art, history, and culture. Again, we thank all of you for joining us, and we hope that this will be just one of many collaborations that express our shared faith in the Filipino. Maraming salamat po at mabuhay tayong lahat.
What do we know about life in the Philippines before the 1500s, before written records? Going from history to prehistory, what do we know about the earliest inhabitants of these islands? Do we have evidence of human life on these islands that could date back tens or even hundreds of thousands of years? Let us listen to the eminent Filipino historian Ambeth Ocampo as he gives us a tour not just of pre-colonial Philippine history, but also of Philippine prehistory.
The Philippines is a young nation with an old history. And over the years, I have realized the Philippines is a young nation with an older prehistory. We do not see them in the Ayala Museum dioramas, but when I was a boy, when I heard the word prehistoric, I immediately associated the word with dinosaurs and cavemen. But to be clear, when we say prehistoric, we mean a time before history. And what is history and what is prehistory? Simply being that prehistory refers to the period before written records. This is why a senior colleague called my attention once when I included prehistory in my class on Philippine history, because for her, Philippine history went back to the 16th century, to the written records of Antonio Picafetta, the chronicler of the 1521 Magellan expedition, and the first published book to make reference to the Philippines, De Moluccis Insulis of 1523, that was drawn from interviews of survivors of the Magellan expedition. For this professor, anything before the 16th century was not the domain of history, it was the domain of sociology and anthropology. Since then, prehistory has been pushed back to the 9th century, not only by Chinese written records of the islands and their people, but by the discovery of the Laguna copper plate inscription, which is the oldest piece of recorded writing in the Philippines today. It is a unique document, and I hope more will be recovered in the future, because my issue with our oldest Philippine document is that it is not part of a long-lost history. Neither is it part of a long-lost epic or piece of literature. It is actually a receipt. It documents the payment of a debt in gold. Unlike the rest of the dioramas that have undergone slight revision, those in the prehistoric section continue to be updated because of new knowledge. The Banawe rice terraces, for example, that we used to be taught was thousands of years old, is much younger than we think. The dioramas depicting life in Tabon caves were made based on material and data that was gone in the 1960s. If you go to Palawan today and visit the site, you have to go by pump boat and you have to go by walking. It is quite a difficult journey, and you actually get to appreciate what Robert Fox and the archaeologists in the 1960s had to go through in order to find and excavate Tabon Cave in Palawan. The material that was excavated by Robert Fox in the early 1960s included a number of excavated stone tools, shell bracelets, and many other traces of life in prehistoric times. However, the most important discovery were fragments of human remains that included a skull cap of the so-called Tabon man that pushed prehistory back 47,000 years. And while hailed at the time as the so-called Philippine Adam, later research proved that the skull cap was from a female, not a man. Since then, other remains have been found in other excavations. Teeth and small bones of a small hominin were excavated from Callao Cave in northern Luzon that pushed back prehistory by 50,000 years. This early man is known as Homo luzonensis. The excavated foot bone of what is now known as the Callao man is older than the Tabon woman, and this pushed back prehistory by 75,000 years. The most interesting is that they found the remains of a rhinoceros. And while no human remains have been found with this excavated rhinoceros, what they found in this site in the north is that the bones of the rhinoceros contain butcher marks that were left by Philippine man before using stone tools. And now this person is called the Kalinga man. This pushes our history back 700,000 years. From the discovery of the Tabon woman in 1962 to the Callao man in 2007 and the Kalinga man in 2018, much of Philippine prehistory is being built that will help us understand where we came from, where we are, and where we are going to go. Going back to the 1960s excavations in the Palawan Cave Complex, one of the significant artifacts found in Lipun Cave was a secondary burial jar. The Manunggul jar was featured on the back of the 1,000 peso bill from 1991. And it is amusing to note that when the design was presented to the Bangko Sentral Monetary Board for approval, someone actually asked, quote, "Ano ba ang significance ng dalawang tiyonggong namamangka?" We know better today that this earthenware burial jar has two figures on a boat that references not just a maritime culture but also a belief in the afterlife. It is proof of prehistoric Philippine culture. The designs on the lid also suggest the swirling waves of the sea. Elsewhere in the museum, we have a collection of pre-colonial, pre-Spanish gold artifacts that prove the Philippines today literally had a golden age. That, contrary to popular belief, the islands and their people were already civilized before the 16th century Spanish conquest. Some artifacts in the Ayala Museum gold collection reference a connection with ancient India that has yet to be fully known and understood. In addition, two artifacts excavated from Butuan, now in the National Museum, a silver strip and ivory seal, both with Sanskrit, await further research. The most spectacular Philippine link to Indian culture is in the Field Museum of Chicago, a gold image found after a heavy rain in Agusan in 1918. The dioramas also reference trade with China dating back a millennium. The earliest Chinese ceramic found in the Philippines dates to the 9th century, Tang Dynasty, and a selection of excavated ceramics in another section of the Ayala Museum also traces this pre-Hispanic trade. It is unfortunate that many people are bored by ceramic displays and that many remark that once they have seen one Ming blue and white jar, they have seen them all. One item you should not miss in the Ayala Museum is the balimbing jarlet, and we have a number of these, named after the fruit that is used to describe political turncoats and opportunists today. This Chinese jarlet from the Yuan period, dating from the 13th to the 14th centuries, has only been found in archaeological sites in the Philippines and Indonesia, suggesting that these were made specifically for export to Southeast Asia. One other item that you shouldn't miss in the tradeware exhibition in the Ayala Museum is a Philippine earthenware copy of a Chinese kendi or mamiform vessel that, when set side by side, shows the influence of trade in art, culture, and the people of the Philippines. Many of us have learned in school that when the Spanish friars and conquistadors arrived in the Philippines in the late 16th century, they destroyed existing Philippine culture and replaced it with their own. There is a diorama on early Philippine printing that references Tomas Pinpin and other Filipino printers who set and published the many vocabularies or dictionaries that documented and preserved Philippine languages like Tagalog, Cebuano, Kapampangan, etc. What is not in the diorama, though, is one of two documented books from 1593, the Doctrina Christiana that documented the Baybayin or ancient Philippine syllabary. It is the Rosetta Stone that allowed us to read and translate Baybayin into Roman alphabet. In this book, we see the communication and translation from Tagalog to Spanish and from the Tagalog syllabary or Baybayin into the Western alphabet. The Ayala Museum dioramas on the prehistoric period have held a long fascination for me, simply because, as a historian, I know that I am limited by written sources. I have been challenged to look beyond by the eminent anthropologist E. Arsenio Manuel, who once introduced his graduate class on Philippine prehistory with the bold statement, quote, "Where history ends, anthropology and archaeology begins."
Right? A lot of people think that Philippine history began 1521, right? March 1521, actually. But, as was mentioned, it goes way back, farther than a lot of people give the Philippines credit for, right? 700,000, that's a lot, that's a long time, right? That's, I mean, it boggles the mind, but again, it's, you know, you have to know history to know self. Otherwise, it's the NO, no history, no self, right? So it works both ways.